Hello, friends, and welcome to Unseen But Believed, the podcast, where we talk about all things invisible illness. I'm your host, Anna Constantopoulos, and I've been chronically ill for over 8 years. In honor of EDS Awareness Month, we have another very exciting special guest. Her name is Victoria Piekut, and she's someone I've looked up to for a really long time, and so I'm so excited for you guys to hear from her. You might know her as Miss Pennsylvania USA 2020, but she is also an entrepreneur, model, pageant coach, and an opera singer. Victoria is the CEO of Wight Elephant Boutique, which emphasizes standout fashion for the standout girl. She personally deals with both Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and POTS, and in this episode, she shares how she's been able to accomplish so much with these illnesses. Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great, and I'm really, really excited to be here.
We just appreciate it so much, especially in honor of EDS Awareness Month. So we know that you have EDS. Do you care to tell us a little bit about your journey to getting diagnosed?
Yeah, actually, it was a tough and long journey. I feel like looking back at my life growing up, I had symptoms probably from, as far back as I can remember. And I never got answers. And whenever you're young and you're complaining about, your stomach hurting or your head hurting, and you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, people are like, oh, like it's just a kid, sit down, take some naps and you'll get over it. But I really think those were real and true symptoms. And it wasn't until 7th grade, so around 2010, where I started to get a little bit of answers, but I was homebound for about, I want to say like 2 or 3 months, because 7th grade is just when my health took a turn for the worse. And I, couldn't attend school. I was stuck in bed and didn't really have any answers. All the doctors that I went to, I was misdiagnosed and treated for something that I didn't have at one point in time, which just made everything worse. And so I went through tons of trials, but in that 2010 kind of year, I got diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome first, because a lot of my symptoms were, cardiovascular related. Whenever I would sit or stand for long periods of time, the blood would pool to my feet. And so my feet turned purple. And whenever I would look down and see my feet purple, I'd be like, okay, I need to sit down. It was at least like a visual sign. But I had a lot of those kinds of symptoms. And so I was diagnosed with POTS first, but it wasn't the whole picture. And it didn't, complete the picture for me until about 5 years later in 2015. That's when I went to actually it's like a functional neurologist chiropractor, and telling him my whole story and telling him my diagnosis, but just feeling like there was more to it. And he was the first person that said, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, have you heard of it? And my mom was like, well, I've heard of it, but nobody ever, brought that up to us. And he was like, no, I'm pretty sure that this is what she has. You're really hypermobile. It would make sense that that's why you would have the POTS symptoms, because all of your joints and your ligaments and your skin are much looser than they should be. And so then that causes, the blood to drop and have POTS. And so I think your main diagnosis is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And that just kind of was like a light bulb moment, and everything finally made sense. And I could get some answers and could get some help.
Wow, so it was about 5 years between when your symptoms really flared up to when you actually got diagnosed with EDS.
Yes.
Wow, that is crazy. So you mentioned previously that there was a misdiagnosis first. How did that happen? What came from that?
So I had a lot of just body pain randomly, and, nausea, headaches, just tons of symptoms. And one of the doctors thought that I had RND, which was reflex neurovascular dystrophy, and it was like kind of like a pain condition. And so I was sent to the Children's Institute to do, I think it was supposed to be like 2 weeks of intensive physical therapy to try to build up my muscles and my body and everything to make it tighter. And with POTS, you are prone to dehydration. And so I only made it like 8 or 9 days, I think, because they were treating me for something that was completely opposite of how they should be treating me. And I remember crying and, begging them to let me go home, and they did. But it was just a really, really tough time because it didn't make sense back then. I didn't even have that POTS diagnosis. And I was just sent home, and it was like, well, this thing was supposed to work. This 2 weeks in here was supposed to, be a jumpstart into my healthy new life. And it was the exact opposite. So it was just a very long and hard and tough journey to get a diagnosis. And it's also tough because, it's an invisible illness. People don't understand and can't, grasp necessarily that one day you can do something and the next day you'll be flat on your back in bed. And, I competed in pageants and I could push myself for a 3-day weekend and I would pay for it. I mean, I would go and get physical therapy, IV fluids, everything afterwards. And people just didn't understand that, well, you can compete in pageants and you can do these things, but you were too sick to do an essay, so it made life very difficult, especially without a proper diagnosis.
Yeah. So how was that, especially in school, being so young? Were teachers understanding at all, or how did that work?
I had some really, really wonderful teachers and administrators that really helped me. But I also had some that just didn't understand. And I don't blame them because, it's middle schooler, high schooler. They're making assumptions. But there unfortunately were some people that did make my time in high school really difficult. And, one teacher that I was kind of citing an example is I was in the newspaper because I got first runner up to a state pageant title and it was amazing. But it was like an AP English class and I was just so sick all the time and it was a ton of work and I had migraines and I was nauseous and I just couldn't read, especially on the computer. It just made everything worse and I was falling so far behind. And I remember that teacher pulling me aside in high school and saying to me, it's really funny. I can see you in the front page of the paper competing in pageants, but you can't get your work done on time. And it just infuriated me because I was like, I get that you don't understand, but don't accuse me of something that just isn't true. And so I had a long, hard battle in high school with administrators and teachers that didn't understand, but there were those far and few between that were so gracious and really helped me get through my high school career. So I'm really thankful for them.
Even just having one or two good teachers, I have found just makes all the difference. You're like, oh, this is what it feels like to be supported.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so true. It's so true.
Especially, I think when you're doing pageants, we can do our makeup and our hair and look totally fine.
Right.
But then it's like they don't see the next 2 weeks where we're just dead in bed. And it's a whole different thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I would have to schedule IV fluids for the day that I would come home for a pageant because I knew I would be flat on my back. It would take every last bit of me to compete, but I wanted to do it. But then, I just had to recover and rest afterwards for sure.
Yeah. And I don't think people realize how intense pageantry can be. And obviously you've been very successful in that. So do you want to share a little bit about how you were able to accomplish that while dealing with all these other crazy symptoms too?
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, going into pageants was kind of, it's funny because it's like I had nothing else. So I threw all of my energy into pageants because I was too sick to compete in sports. And whenever I was actually homebound for a time in high school and middle school, the school rules were that, okay, if you're homebound, you can't compete on any sports team. You can't go to a school dance. You can't be in the school musical. And we had to fight them on that because I was I was going to school for I was half the day. The first half of the day, I was just too sick to go. And the second half I was there and we were like, I'm there. I'm there half the day. How can I not compete in sports? How can I not do these things? I'm literally in school. There are kids that are homeschooled in the school district that don't even attend school. And they're able to be on the sports teams. They're able to be in the musical. So how can I not be? And so I just had so many roadblocks. And I got a letter in the mail when I was 13 years old to join National American Miss. And at the time, I was singing opera. I was very involved in music. And that was just kind of my escape, was first piano and then singing. And so I just dived really deep into opera training. That's just what I wanted to do in college. And I saw that this pageant had a talent competition. And I was like, how amazing would that be on my college resume if I competed and I won the statewide talent competition? I was considering going to college for voice. And because I wasn't allowed to do things in school, I had nothing on my performance resume. And like, I can't apply to college and they're going to say, what have you done? And I'll be like, nothing. I'm just here. So I finally convinced my mom to let me do this pageant. And she was very afraid. She told me no for like 3 years because she was like, you are too sick to get out of bed half the time. How are you going to compete at this state pageant? And I was like, I can do it. Trust me. Like, it'll be great. And so after a few years, she finally said yes, because I was approaching that college time. And she's like, all right, yeah, you like need something on your resume. And it took, I mean, my whole family, a whole team of people to make sure that I could do this. I mean, we packed so many electrolyte drinks and
liquid IV all the way,
Neofit, the whole nine. And I actually talked with like the staff and said, I can't stand for a long period of time in heels. I know that you're doing this alphabetically by last name, but is there any way I could be bumped to the front of the line or have a chair in the back? Because, when with the POTS symptoms, hand in hand with EDS, when you're standing just normally, all the blood and everything is dropping to your feet. But when you're in heels, I mean, that just makes it drop even faster. And I really, at the time, could not stand for maybe more than 10 minutes tops without getting dizzy or nauseous or lightheaded. And so they were incredibly helpful and gracious, and they put me as like number 6 or something like that to compete completely out of alphabetical order, and made sure I had a chair. The staff was amazing. They were always coming up to me asking me if I needed anything. And so I think just being open and honest and asking if there were certain accommodations that could be made was so helpful. And having my family there, in between rehearsals or whatever, I was able to go lay down. Somebody, if I wasn't feeling well, they could go run and get me water or, food or something like that. And having my family's support also just really gave me a drive to do it. So I really, have to thank the National American Miss System for giving me such a positive initial idea of pageantry, because at the end of the day, pageantry is about celebrating you and your differences and what makes you unique and what drives you forward. And this was a really big challenge in my life that I think shaped me for the better. And I shared about it in my interview, and it was my first pageant ever. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Was not coached at all, like just came out of nowhere. But I was real and authentic, and I shared my story and I shared my struggles. And I think there were about 112 or 13 girls competing, and I ended up getting first runner-up.
Wow.
It was
for a first pageant. That's insane.
It was crazy. And so after that, and I think in talent, I got like third runner up in talent or something like that. And so after that, I was just like elated with everything that happened. I felt so validated because it gave me a platform to share my story and connect with other people. I talked about it in my personal intro, and there were so many people, every pageant that I would compete in over the years, there would be so many people that I would meet that would come up to me and either say, oh my gosh, I was just diagnosed with this, or somebody I know was just diagnosed with this, or I've been having so many symptoms and problems. And it sounds like I might have what you have. Is there a doctor that you could recommend for me? And so that was just the other rewarding factor that kept me going, is spreading the word, spreading the message, helping people to get diagnosed, and just having that validation that, there are other people out there like me, and my story is helping them too.
And that's so amazing. I mean, the fact that you're able to have that impact, such an early level of pageantry, and that you're able to continue that throughout all of your titles. Was that something you ever were afraid of sharing? Like when you first started, were you ever nervous about that?
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. Because I was just afraid that, all I had was my high school career to look at, and everybody told me I was too sick to do all these things. So I was terrified that the judges or the organizations would think the same thing, that I was, not capable of handling the responsibilities of a title holder. And there were times that I doubted it too. I mean, I thought that I could never compete in the USA system because I got so sick working out. I was like, how in the world would I compete in a swimsuit competition? And so I had put that off for so long. But over the years, I just found ways to to cope, and my symptoms started to get better. I had, a little bit of a miraculous healing, in my opinion, in 2017. And before that, I was on home health care. I had a nurse coming to my house every 2 weeks administering IV fluids because I was just so dehydrated all the time. But around 2017, I just had this miraculous healing that happened, and IV fluids actually started to make me sick. And so I went a year. I gave myself 1 year without getting IV fluids, which was like unheard of in my life. I couldn't go barely 2 weeks without it. And so I said, if I have 1 year, 1 full year that I don't get IV fluids, I'm going to compete for Pennsylvania USA, because it was just this dream that I always had that was never attainable. I was there every year supporting all of my friends that were competing, but had just kind of written it off. I was like, I can't physically do this. But yeah, I hit that 1 year mark, and I told my parents, all right, it's been 1 year and I want to compete. And they were like, you're crazy. And I was like, yes, but I want to do it. And so that was another thing, is that I started to exercise. I started to get moving a little bit more. That helped tone my body. And whenever I was in, that pageant shape, it was the best I've ever felt, because I was eating so clean and working out, but not pushing myself. I was like doing what my limits were for my body. But that was the best I had ever felt. And that also kind of jump-started my thought process in life of just, eating, trying to eat clean, trying to stick to, moving around, being healthy. That kind of was never a thing in my life before. And it made such a world of difference. And so then at Miss Pennsylvania USA, the first time I competed, I was afraid to talk about it because I didn't want them to think that I was sick, but it was part of my story. And I know how many people it had helped leading up to that point. And so I shared it, and I said, but I'm here and I run my own business and I do all these things. And I really want to show people that you don't have to let the challenges in your life limit you in accomplishing your goals and your dreams. And that year I ended up placing second runner up to Miss Pennsylvania USA. And so I was like, all right, I'm giving myself one more shot. I'm coming back. And the next year I ended up winning, which was incredible.
I mean, that's just an amazing journey. After, you talked about being so healthy and working out and eating clean and all those things. Did you find that after you competed at Miss Pennsylvania at that time that you didn't have the big crash afterwards? Yeah,
actually, there was a lot less. I made sure that I was hydrating, of course. If I skip the hydration, if I'm not, super strict with myself on that, I'll feel it. And I just kind of kept to that mindset. I definitely did have a whole, pizza to myself afterwards. For sure.
You have to after the swimsuit competition. I mean, come on.
Yeah. It's like an initiation. Yeah. It means you went through the whole process. But no, I really didn't have that big crash that I usually did. And I feel like the healthy eating and making sure that I'm exercising and moving and keeping my body somewhat toned at this point, that made a difference for me. And I notice the difference even still whenever I'm eating, burgers and pizza and fries and pop, and I feel so gross after, and my symptoms flare up. And whenever I'm eating clean, I'm getting rid of those unnecessary sugars, or for me, even like dairy and wheat sometimes makes me feel a little just worse. And so whenever I'm a little bit more strict and making sure I'm moving, I do really feel a difference. And that might not be the case for everybody, but, competing in these pageants had really opened my eyes to that being a source for me to feel a little bit better.
And obviously exercise is something that doctors always tell you, oh, this will help your symptoms, but they don't always tell us how to exercise, especially when you have something like POTS where you might like pass out if you sit up too quickly, or EDS where it's like you might not be able to move after you work out. So were there any like specific workouts you found that were helpful, like that kind of minimize your symptoms, or was it just kind of trial and error?
It was a lot of trial and error, and it was a lot of building myself up to a certain point. You can't, be on the couch for 5 years and then just say, okay, I'm going to go run a marathon tomorrow. You have to build yourself up to it. And it was a lot of just, walking on the treadmill, walking around the block, doing Pilates type exercises on the ground where I'm not standing and, exerting myself. That really helped a lot. It was more of like core on a mat on the floor, doing Pilates, leg lifts, core training. And then that got me to the point where I could start doing a little bit more intense exercises like HIIT training and like high intensity intervals. And that's kind of what I do now. I'm still at that nice point where I can exert myself a little bit more. But I really feel the difference whenever I just walk and you try to get those 10,000 steps in a day. I'm not great at achieving that goal on a daily basis. I can come pretty close, but that is something that I really feel the difference on. It doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to feel, like you're not making progress if you're not running a marathon. Every little thing that you can do, if you can do 10 sit-ups today and then next week you can do 15, that's still progress. That's amazing. And that's your body responding positively. You just got to make sure you're listening to your body, not trying to overexert yourself, and keeping hydrated. That was a really big thing for me too. That's
really important. And I mean, it's especially impressive you being able to do HIIT because that's just hard for anyone. So kudos to you for being able to do that with EDS and POTS.
I do cut the timer a little bit short sometimes and say, nope, like that's good enough for me. I have like an app that I work out on now, and it'll be like 45 seconds of mountain climbers. And I'm like, let's try 20.
But that's important, listening to your body and kind of figuring out what you can do without, causing a 2-week flare up. Because exactly. I definitely have that tendency to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go run a marathon today and then just not moving for a month after that. That doesn't benefit anyone. So thank you for sharing about that. That's really helpful because I know a lot of people ask about that. Like, I know I need to work out, but how on earth am I going to start doing that? So just walking and easing into it, I think that's the best advice ever.
Definitely.
And okay, so you mentioned a little bit, and if this is too personal, like we don't have to talk about it, but you mentioned a miraculous healing. Do you want to talk about that? Okay.
Yeah, I'll totally share that. Okay. So I have a really strong faith, and throughout my life, I was always going to church and praying, and I had so many people praying for me over the years to just have, health and healing. And there was just that time, I think it was around 2017, where I was supposed to walk in New York Fashion Week, and I was bedridden for about 2 weeks. Every time I stood up, I almost passed out. My heart was beating through the roof. My parents were like carrying me up the stairs to bed. It was one of the worst times, worst flare-ups I had ever had. And I was just at like my wit's end. I had gone to the hospital. I had gotten so many IV fluids and nothing was helping. And that was the weirdest part, was that IV fluids weren't helping. Usually as soon as I would get, 2 liters, 3 liters, I would be, up and ready to go. And it wasn't helping. And that was like a warning, like, oh crap, what is going on? There's something bigger here. I don't know what's happening. I have no more answers. I've tried everything. The doctors have no answers. And my mom was part of a Bible study group, and there was a woman that led it out of maybe Kentucky or something. And she asked if she could just get on the phone with me and pray for about an hour. And after she did, I remember laying in bed and I just had the phone on speaker next to me, and she was just praying to God to heal me and take this away so that I could do all the things that I wanted to do in life. And I just felt, I don't know, it's a feeling that I can't describe. But I just like felt weird. And looking back, I was like, I think I felt normal, and I didn't know what normal felt like because it was so new. And immediately after I got off that phone and I prayed with her and just asked for God to heal me, I got up and I started walking around, and I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And I just felt weird, and I couldn't walk. I wasn't getting dizzy. And I was like, oh my gosh, can we go for a walk around the block? I need to test something. I need to see what's going on here. And I immediately got outside and we took our dog for a walk, and I made it the whole way around the block, and I was totally fine. And I was like, oh my God, I was just in bed an hour ago. not being able to move. I got in our pool. I started playing volleyball with my dad, and I was like, what is going on? And so that's when I was like, okay, I don't know what's happening. I think I might have just been healed by God. I maybe, I don't know. But we had IV fluids coming up. And I was like, I'm not going to cancel, I still need this. And so after I started getting those IV fluids every 2 weeks, I had to they would give me like a 3-liter bag, and I had to cut it short because I was like, I feel like I can't take any more. And then they started to make me sick. And after an hour, or not an hour, a liter of fluids, I was like, I'm good. I can't do this. And so we started pushing it further. And instead of 2 weeks, it would be every month. And then after that, it was like every couple months. And then after that, I was like, I don't feel like I need it. I'm able to do things. I'm going to the gym. I feel okay. And so we stopped. We told them to not come back. And that was when I had that year long, I was like, if I can go 1 year without IV fluids, I think I really had some kind of healing. And then I can, start to do all the things that I wanted to do, which would include Miss Pennsylvania USA, include running my business. And, I still have things every now and then. Like if a doctor looks at me, I definitely have EDS. Like I'm incredibly vulnerable. And I still have different flare-ups, but it's not nearly what it was. And so, I just thank God for that really every day, that I'm able to do these things and share my story. And, hopefully that helps somebody else too.
Praise God. I mean, that is such a powerful testimony. And I mean, clearly it's not something you've taken for granted, but that you've clearly used in service of God and his kingdom and helping other people. And I mean, that's truly amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I honestly, I'm surprised I'm not crying right now, because every time I talk about it, I end up just like bawling. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty close. So we'll change the jokes now. So I didn't know that you had such a strong faith. That's amazing. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your faith was like during that time when you got sick and how that kind of worked?
Yeah, that was really tough for me. And honestly, I feel like it might have been more tough for my parents, because for me, even if you'd ask them or anybody around me, they would always say that I was just so positive through it all. But that's because I didn't want to focus on being sick. I remember the doctors wanted me to go to a therapist, which, some people really need. But I remember being like, I don't want to sit for an hour in a room and talk about how sick I am. I want, that's going to make me depressed. I just want to go out and, have fun and do what I can and not, have my limits, but not focus on it. I want to focus on life. And everybody always told me, all the doctors, everybody was like, she's just so positive. It's like, I don't want to talk about it. So, I mean, it was really tough for my parents, because, they just really wanted answers, and we prayed and prayed and prayed. And it just felt like for years we weren't getting them, or they just weren't coming as fast as we wanted them to. And I wasn't getting better. But I feel like because of my faith, I always kept that mindset that this was something that God wanted me to have in my life for a purpose. God doesn't make mistakes, and God doesn't do things without thinking them through either. And so, even competing in pageantry made me a little bit more introspective and feel, I think, more that way, that this is something that I have to go through in life to inspire people and come out the other side and really make a difference. And I think especially winning Miss Pennsylvania USA and seeing how many people my story touched and I got to share it with. And I had, people from all across the world messaging me, which was insane. And I got to do so many appearances before COVID, but, I got to go to the Disability Summit in Pittsburgh and talk with all of these students. It was about 500 students that are suffering from various kinds of disabilities, and be able to share my story and say, look, I'm Miss Pennsylvania, don't let this limit you. If I can do it, you can do it too. And I think, at 12, 13, 14 years old, I didn't realize that would be part of my story, and why going through all the trials I did were so important. But looking back on it now, I really feel like God wanted me to go through these struggles to then have the platform to share about it and raise awareness and inspire other people. And I really feel like, especially even in like COVID, all of us that won the COVID year were like, oh, we've been training for this our whole lives. Why did we get to win the year that we can't do anything? The year that we're stuck in our kitchens and, doing everything by Zoom. And we weren't even sure that we were going to have Miss USA at that point. I just kept reminding myself and my other friends that were title holders that God gave us this title this year for a reason. Everything in my life, there are points where I don't understand why it's happening, but later down the line, I'll be able to look back and be like, oh, I see the bigger picture now. I see the big picture that God saw 10 years ago. And we were like, I don't know why we were all picked for this year, but it's for a purpose. It's for a reason that we won this specific year. And I just remember, because everything was so virtual, that I did still get to do a lot, things like this on a podcast or Zoom meetings with, people that were stuck at home and going through things that I did. And I was still able to impact and touch so many lives, which I'm really thankful for. And I just feel like, again, there's just always a bigger picture. No matter what you're going through, you might not be able to see the reason for it now, but just wait a bit, be patient, and you'll be able to look back and realize, or why one door closes, right now it might be really tough and hard to get through, but you'll be able to look back in 5-10 years from now and say, oh, I see why that happened now, because now that door closed and I was able to do all of these things. If that door stayed open, none of this would have happened for me.
I mean, yeah, that's so true. I mean, you've done so much through that you might not have been able to do otherwise. And do you feel like you maybe had a unique perspective on the pandemic as a title holder since you had already dealt with health issues?
I do. It was definitely a scary time for everybody, no matter what you were going through. But I feel like I was able to be really positive through all of that just because of everything I had dealt with. And it might be, I don't know if it's like, I guess it's a strength. It might be like, not a weakness, but one of my faults. Like, I'm positive to a fault. No matter what I'm going through, I'm able to, because I have that strong faith, I'm able to, you say, well, God doesn't want me to have this for a reason, or, I'm going through this for a reason, and I'm able to stay positive. So I feel like, I became really close with my Miss Maine. And we did, because we started working out together. I think she DM'd me on Instagram the one day and was like, hey, do you want to work out together? And I'd never talked to her before. And it was just going to be us one-on-one. And I was like, this could be really awkward. But you know what? I'm going to say yes. And so we got on FaceTime and just said like, oh, we should work out together to keep each other accountable through all of this. And we just started talking. We connected so much. And she ended up being one of my bridesmaids in my wedding this past year. Like, we're still so close. And I just remember talking with her so much and, reminding her and reminding all of my other friends that, this is happening for a reason. This is too big to not have a bigger purpose and, maybe bring us together for some reason. And again, having the titles this year, I know you could easily look at it as such a depressing thing. You've worked for so long and so hard, and now, you get to sit in your living room for 6-7 months and not go out and do the things that you thought you were going to do. But it's for a bigger purpose. It might not be how you wanted it to look, but it's how God wants it to look and how God wants it to happen for you in your life. And so I feel like, I'm just wildly positive all the time. And, it might be annoying to my husband when things happen, but I think it's good to have somebody in your life too that has that perspective and can kind of shift your own perspective too.
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely a strength, especially with everything that you've been through. I think it's, a testament to God and to your own faith and your own strength that you've been able to be so positive throughout all that. It's definitely way better than the alternative of just kind of sinking into it and giving up. That's really amazing. I'm glad you're able to do all that. And I'm sorry that your year was 2020. That really sucks. And I mean, you did so amazing through it, but it still sucks.
Yeah. It was challenging for sure, but I'm still grateful that I even had the opportunity to represent Pennsylvania for the Miss USA organization.
That's good. And you did compete in person for Miss USA, right?
We did. And it was wild because that was the only national thing that was happening at the time. We still competed in November of 2020. So it was still 2020.
Yeah, because Miss America pushed theirs back a year. So I didn't know they did that same year.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was still 2020. And I remember, and that was the other thing that was like upsetting to all the girls is we got to Miss USA and then we would just like be in our hotel rooms. We didn't have all the fun appearances. We didn't have all the fun dinners. We weren't able to say our name on stage. Pageant girls dream of that moment. You're on stage at Miss USA and you get to say, Victoria Piekut, Pennsylvania. And we didn't get to because it would be sharing the mics. And so they had, there was no real answers at that time about how COVID spreads or, what's really causing it or how dangerous it may or may not be. And so they just had like a pre-recording of somebody saying everybody's name and state as we like walked and smiled. And so there was just all of that was like kind of depressing. But at the same time, I just had to keep reminding myself that like, this is supposed to be my experience for a reason. I'm supposed to have this title this year for a reason. So make the most of it. But I really feel like our class in general got so close because we were the only 51 women in the world dealing with that at the time. We were the only Miss USA class of 2020, 51 women. And so we really, really bonded over that shared experience because the 51 of us are really the only ones that understand what we, did and didn't go through in that time.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine competing like that and not being able to say your name. I mean, that's like the moment that like you dream of.
I know.
I think we should redo it for you guys. Just have something where you get to reintroduce yourself.
There were so many people actually that said that too. They were like, we need a Miss USA 2020 redo. Like we need to have a
at least like a reunion. I mean, we would all watch it because I think you guys had to wear masks on stage too, right?
We did. I have in my drawer over there, I have a Swarovski encrusted Sherry Hill face mask that matched my gown, which was, pretty cool keepsake.
Yeah,
but
at least it's still glamorous, if you have to wear a mask.
Hopefully it doesn't have to come in handy at some point, but it'll make a really cool thing to talk to my kids about in the future. But yeah, we had to wear masks. And then it was, if for like opening number, we had to hold them in our hands and walk on stage and then put them on as soon as we were getting off. For gown, they had brown paper bags with our names on it backstage, and we dropped our mask in the paper bag. And then as we walked across stage, somebody ran our paper bag to the other side so that we could pull our mask out of it and wear it as soon as we got off stage. There's so many things. Like in the dressing room, we couldn't have hair and makeup artists because of capacity limits. And so every single one of us had to do our own hair and makeup for a live Miss USA competition on national TV. So that was stressful, but we had like taped boxes on the floor in the dressing room where we all had, plus side, I got my own table to do my hair and makeup. Everybody had their own hair and makeup station. We didn't have to share with anybody else. So yeah, that was a positive. But we had like taped squares on the floor. And when you were in your square at your table, you could take your mask off. But as soon as you stepped out of your square, you had to put your mask on. If somebody entered your square to help zip you up, you all had to have masks on. It was just, so many new things, so many wild things that were going on. Nobody had answers. And, we were all just kind of winging it, but trying to keep everybody safe. And so I definitely have a very unique Miss USA experience for sure.
Yeah, and for people who, don't know much about pageants, I don't think they realize how much rehearsal goes even to the simplest things, like your placement of your hands. Yeah. So having to add a mask last minute is like ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it was wild.
At least you're, very able to adapt to things after dealing with a life of health issues. Yeah. You know how to adapt to random changes. So
adaptability is probably the word for my experiences in life.
Well, since the pandemic and everything and having to adapt all that, did you ever actually end up getting COVID? And how did that kind of affect your health?
I did, actually. And I got it, January of 2021. My now husband and I, we got engaged like right after Miss USA. He had bought the ring before I competed. We've been together for like almost a decade now. I've known him since 7th grade. Like we've grown up together.
We need to do another podcast episode just on y'all's relationship. I see the cute little TikToks you post of you guys. I'm like, that's really the most adorable thing.
I would love that. He's so like shy that I don't know if he could get on, but I will happily share. But yeah, so he was like, waiting to propose as soon as like, if I won, okay, well, I'm Miss USA, but if I don't win, I'm going to go back and hopefully get engaged. And so that was kind of the plan. And he proposed at the end of December of 2020. And so we had a little family get together. It was just my immediate family. And it was like my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, their newborn baby, my grandparents and Jake's parents. Like that was it. It was all of us. We've not been around anybody. But somebody there was exposed, I guess, prior. And so all of us got COVID, and none of us could help each other out because we were all like wildly ill. And, my parents, I think my grandparents lived with my parents at the time. And so the four of them were in a house together. Actually, I don't think Jake's parents got it, but all of my grandparents got it. My immediate family, my brother, my sister-in-law, the 3-month-old baby, and me and Jake, we all had it. Actually, my grandfather then passed away from it at the end of that month. Everybody else, thank you. But that was really tough because we weren't able to go visit him in the hospital. And so like, I still am kind of working through that. To me, it like doesn't feel like he passed away because I never got to like see him. I never had that closure. He was cremated. So, when we had the service, there's just like the urn. And so my mind still doesn't really click that he passed away and is gone. But that was a really, really hard time for my family, my grandmother, everybody. But everybody else made it out, and we were, really thankful for that. The baby was healthy, and it was just a really, really challenging time for all of us. My mom has now gotten it like 3 or 4 times in the past like 3 years, and she has a bunch of health issues too. She also has POTS and EDS and so many other things. So it's always scary whenever she gets something or when I get something, and my grandparents get something. But I think hopefully our immune systems are a little bit stronger now.
Yeah. We're definitely not post-pandemic yet, but hopefully we're easing out of it,
Yeah.
But I'm really sorry about that. I know that's really devastating, especially not being able to say goodbye. I mean, I can't even imagine how heartbreaking that is. So I'm really sorry you and your family went through that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was definitely tough and not something I wish on anybody.
Of course, yeah. But yeah, I'll definitely keep your family my prayers. I know that's really tough.
I appreciate that so much.
So how has been, adjusting to kind of post-ish pandemic life, at least post-pageant life? Congrats on getting married, by the way. That's amazing.
Thank you.
But you're still currently running Wight Elephant Boutique, right? Yeah. How's that going?
Yeah. It's honestly that I think has been the most wild thing because I had this business during COVID, and I had at the time, now we just have one location. We kind of like consolidated down. But at the time I had 2 storefront locations and I was shipping worldwide, and I had, so many employees and all these things, and we had to shut everything down when COVID happened. Like, could not let anybody in the door, everybody's home. We were still getting some online orders. And so then we would go to the store and the streets were empty, nobody's around, and we were shipping things out. We're Lysoling all of the clothes and like hand sanitizing all the time. And it was just wild. And that was a really, really scary time. We didn't know if, my family helps me run the business. My dad actually, my parents met through retail. They have a retail background. And then my brother's a computer engineer. And so the 4 of us kind of came together and started this whole boutique for me. And my dad, he took early retirement the day before we opened our first storefront location so that he could help me full time. And he's there every day. My mom is there. My mom goes on the buying trips with me. My brother's like my IT on speed dial when something's going wrong. I threw a camera at Jake the one year and was like, I need a photographer. Here you go. You got to learn. And so he still takes all the photos. My sister-in-law worked for us at one point before she had the baby. And so it's like a whole family thing. And it was really scary because we weren't sure that we were going to make it out. Businesses were shutting down left and right. They couldn't keep up. But we did have that online element that we kept going. And I'm really glad that we did. Everything was online. We didn't have to, take pictures of anything new, try to build a website like a lot of other businesses were trying to do. And we had an online customer base already. So that really saved us. And in that year, that pushed us into what we really do now, our live sales. We have a mobile app, and we do like, QVC. We go live kind of like QVC.
The modern QVC.
And we have our own Wight Elephant app, and we go live there and on Facebook. And I actually have one tonight that I have to get ready for in a couple hours. And we, try on all the new stuff. Our customers are able to comment and talk with us and ask questions. And, we laugh and we have a great time, and people tune in from all over. And so that's kind of where that was born. I was like, if we can't have the customers come to us, we have to have a way to go to the customers. And we found a platform to host it on, and it's just really become a really big integral part of our business now. So that's something that, again, adaptability. Like, what are you going to do when you can't have anybody come into your store, but you still want to make sure that you're serving people, and they can still shop and really feel like they know you. I don't want to be some nameless, faceless brand that you don't know who's behind it. You don't know the story. You don't know it's a family. And so I get on there, and everybody knows Jake. Everybody knows my dad. Everybody knows my parents. They know what's going on in my life. And I've had some incredible people that I've met through just having this business, and some of the most supportive people. They're on every live sale. There's two girls. I got to tell them that I'm talking about this. I'm talking about them on this, but there's these two girls that live in the state of Indiana, and they're sister-in-laws, and they kept up with us. And they actually, every year we hold a Galentine's Day event at the store, and they fly from the state of Indiana to come to our boutique for a weekend, and they make like a Pittsburgh girls weekend out of it. And that was so crazy to me. I was on a live sale talking about Galentine's Day, and they were like, we just bought our plane tickets. We're coming. And like, live on camera, I'm like, you what? Like, did I read that right?
That's a devotion right there.
Yeah. Oh God. And so as soon as I got off the line, I was like, balloons, like confetti, we need to make this a big thing. Like, this has to be good. People are flying in. Like, this has to be the best thing we've ever done. And so it's just, and I mean, they still do it. They've continued to come, and even more people tune in. We have some really dedicated customers out west that tune into the live sales. And so that's just been another really rewarding thing, is that I feel like I have friends all over. And even my maid of honor in my wedding, she was a customer at the store. And one day, that's how I met her. She just walked in, and we started talking, and got to know each other. And I asked her if she wanted to help around the holidays, and she's still here like 4 years later, and was now my maid of honor in my wedding. So I mean, it's been a wild journey as a business owner. I don't think I would have, when I started this business in college, I don't think I would have had to go through a worldwide pandemic and come out the other side. But it's definitely shaped my business into what it is now, and I'm actually really grateful.
That's really amazing. And yes, to everyone listening, go check it out. They have the most adorable things. Go check out the website, join the live stuff. Like, it's amazing. Definitely go check them out.
Thank you.
I thought that before we were even going to do this. I just thought your stuff was amazing. So, but yeah, and it's so amazing to see that you're doing all these amazing things. I mean, you're running your own company. You survived a pandemic in more ways than one, which is just, I mean, none of us thought we'd ever live to say that. Right. And just thinking about where you came from, where you're, bedbound for 3 months while you're still, in high school. And I mean, that's just amazing, everything you've done. And not just focusing on your own success, but on using it to help other people. I mean, it's just so inspirational. I know it's inspiring to me to think that, okay, if she can do this, and, she's dealing with EDS and POTS and all these things, like, maybe I can do something like that too. And that's just such an amazing testimony. Is there anything else you want to share?
Well, I have to say thank you for, reaching out, and this has been so fun to be a part of and continue to share my story. And, if anybody has questions, there's people that have still reach out to me with questions that are just diagnosed. I would love to talk with you and help. But I feel like there's so many support systems now out there. There are so many Facebook groups and even on Instagram. And that's something that's great about technology now, is we're able to connect like this and connect with other people that have gone through what we go through. And, I'm just really grateful for that. But I just don't want people to think that because somebody diagnoses them with something and, you have these challenges that other people might not have, that doesn't mean that you're less than and you're unworthy and you can't accomplish your goals and dreams. You might have to, shift a little bit, and they might not look like you thought they would, but you can still accomplish things, and things that you never thought you would be doing. Like, I never thought I would be on a podcast talking about my health journey way back when. So, there's a plan for your life. You're going through this for a reason, and you might not see it now, but you will eventually.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to leave a rating or subscribe for future episodes. It's a small action, but it really does help to spread the word about invisible illnesses. Also, if you want to stay up to date on all things Unseen But Believed, go follow me over on Instagram and TikTok at Unseen But Believed. And remember, just because invisible illnesses are unseen, they should be believed.